Local broadcast of Nova is made possible in part by the members of WETA, in partnership with Waste Management Incorporated, an international waste services company, and with the Emhart Corporation. Its Planning Research Corporation and advanced technology subsidiaries have 9,000 people providing technology-based services to government and industry.
Tonight on Nova, when junk mailers started to get personal, this man went to find out where they got the information. He discovered a vast private intelligence network surprisingly easy to access.
I didn't think this was going to work. I typed in Dan Quayle, and there it was.
Is there any escape from the relentless flood of advertising? It seems unlikely when direct marketers tell us, we know who you are, we know what you buy, and above all, we know where you live.
Funding for Nova is provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying health care products worldwide. And Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. Major funding for Nova is provided by the financial support of viewers like you.
Last year, the U.S. Postal Service delivered on average 1,000 items to every household in the United States. Half of this is made up of third-class bulk rate items. To most people, this is junk mail, unsolicited, unwanted advertising material crammed into their mailbox. Most of it is thrown out, unopened or unread. But still, the junk arrives in ever-increasing volume. Like many Americans, writer Erik Larson wondered why. What drives this lemming-like obsession with sending out costly pieces of paper that nobody wants to read?
Well, nothing very exciting today. Catalog. Oh, they're even following us here now. Can't get away. Insurance, bill.
We haven't had this one in a while.
We get a ton of junk mail. My wife is a doctor. She gets immense amounts. We get mortgage insurance pitches. We get kids' catalogs. We get just about everything imaginable. It tends to fall into three categories. First, we get the totally inept kind, sort of throwback to a different era. Like this is from a dating service, and since I just had my second child, it's not really appropriate. Then there are the tricky letters. These are the ones that show that there's been some research done. Now, for example, here's the confidential credit report. It's supposed to kind of frighten you, I think, into opening. And it's not exactly a credit report. It says my credit is excellent and offers me a credit card. It's not quite what I had in mind. Then there are the gimmicks. Particularly clever one, I think, is using a cartoon and then putting my wife's name in the caption. You're my press agent. You tell me why Christine Gleason is in People and I'm not. Here's another technique that AT&T is using in a recent mailing. They put a penny in there.
This is what's called an involvement device. Like the teaser copy on the envelope, its task is to catch the eye and gain a few seconds reprieve from the trash can. Another good gimmick is personalization, giving the impression of personal correspondence. But is anybody fooled? The AT&T letter was one of 2.5 million that rolled out of this massive printing works near Chicago. True, each letter is slightly different, but the customizing is done as the web passes under laser printing heads at full press speed. The details are fed in by a computer reading a file of customer names. Here, they operate a press-to-mailbag service. The mail is pre-sorted by zip code and postal carrier route, and so earns a considerable discount from the Postal Service. To the senders, this is not junk mail. This is direct marketing, a branch of advertising that has suddenly blossomed. Its budgets now exceed traditional mass marketing, such as print and TV. The United States is at the sharp end of a global revolution. Among the advertising agencies of Madison Avenue, this sudden change is causing
shock. It has sent a shock wave around the advertising world in the U.S., in Europe, everywhere. Because all the assumptions of the past are breaking down. The marketplace has just changed. There are problems out there, big problems for marketers. It's now a demassified marketplace. It's splintered into little pieces and niches, so that we have 9 different kinds of Coke out there, and we have over 200 kinds of breakfast cereal fighting for space on the shelves out there. We've got the clutter, my God, thousands of messages a day aimed at that consumer. And how do I get my message through? How do I support a brand that's just for a small little part of the market and not for everybody? The answer came with the new technology of the computer. The computer is the solution.
The computer is also cheap. The power to process databases of millions of consumer names is now within every marketer's reach. The economics are simple.
Look at it this way. You go on television, which is the mass medium. It costs you $7 1,000 to reach 1,000 people. Now, maybe only 1 out of 10 are really a potential buyer of your product, so that's 10 times $7. That makes $70 1,000. But you need like 5 impressions out there before they get the message. Now we're up to $350 1,000. More or less what it costs you to send a single mailing into the home. Now, that single mailing is going to someone I selected carefully because I know they're a prospect, I know they're interested, I know they're ready to buy. My computer tells me, the information tells me.
You're gonna like this?
To the general public, this sudden growth of computer-powered marketing has not gone unnoticed.
The interesting thing about a lot of the junk mail we've been getting the last couple of years or so, it shows signs that there's an intelligence behind it, that they know an awful lot about us. In fact, they even knew we were having kids before the kids arrived.
We don't know how they got the information that we were expecting a child. And then after the baby was born, there was an avalanche of further materials. And we received things on her first birthday. I mean, as though they knew somehow when we had her. And we've gotten similar things now, having had just another child.
One of the most interesting trends, I think, is housing information. We became home buyers, and we started getting mail like this. Now, I don't tell my friends routinely what my mortgage is. So I began to wonder, how much do they know about me? And how do they collect that kind of information?
Erik Larson decided to find out. As a journalist, he knew how to get the inside story. He began his quest in Baltimore before their recent move. His idea was to follow the trail of his personal information to see how it ended up in the hands of the junk mailers. His first call was the registry office of the Clarence Mitchell Courthouse. This was where his land records were filed when he bought his Baltimore home.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you tell me where the microfilms are for the land records?
Yes. They're over there in the green box.
The green box, all right. That's pretty easy to use, right?
Yes.
All right, thanks a lot.
Public records like these are archived on microfilm and kept on open access. All that's needed is the address, and the deeds can be retrieved. Within minutes, Larson had the details on screen. When he bought his house and what he paid. His mortgage records were all there too. And so were everyone else's. Here's where you could come to snoop on the neighbors. But Larson was not alone in the courthouse that day. Someone else was taking a keen interest in other people's records. Clearly, she wasn't just being nosy. She was systematically sifting through the files, picking out information. But for whom? Direct marketers? Larson wondered if this was how his data got out of the courthouse and into a mailing list. His instinct told him it was certainly a lead to follow. It turned out that the woman was an agent for the Lusk Company, an outfit that trades real estate facts and figures. Her boss agreed to meet Larson later that day.
Hi, my name's Erik Larson. I'm here to see Rufus Lusk.
Okay, one moment.
Thanks.
Mr. Lusk III, please report to the reception area. He'll be right out.
All right, thanks.
Good afternoon, Lusk Company. May I help you? Okay, thank you. One moment.
Hi, Eric. I'm Rufus Lusk III.
Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Welcome to the Lusk Company.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a look around here?
Okay, great.
This is a picture of my grandfather in 1930, the year that he founded the company.
1930, huh?
Yes.
This is the heart of the operation. Our large computer facility over here holds about 10 million records. We have a little thumbnail sketch of every property in the Washington, Baltimore, Richmond areas in there.
Really?
You met Paula. Here she is keying the information into a database, which we will then make available on reports, mailing lists, however the customer wants it.
Every week, Lusk produces regular digests of real estate transactions like this. No one is spared. The records of rich and poor alike are on open display.
Well, Eric, fire away.
It's very interesting so far. The general public, how do they react when they find that this information is readily available?
Well, I think people always like to know that that information is available if they are purchasing a house. Now, on the other side, if they don't want a former spouse to know what they paid, maybe it's a little bit embarrassing. But freedom of information and embarrassment sort of go together, hand in hand a little bit.
And it's not just the real estate business who are customers of Lusk's.
We're also very proud of the fact that a number of law enforcement agencies use our materials. The FBI and the Drug Enforcement Agency have used our materials for some years. We are making the record available to them in an easy-to-use format.
Lusk sells these computerized public records to anyone who wants them. Other companies do the same. Maybe direct marketers were joining them all together to make a massive database of every property in the United States. Larson's sources told him of a company in Virginia that regularly bought this kind of data. They would likely have bought his records too. Still on the trail of his personal information, Larson paid them a visit. In the Art Deco halls of this former torpedo factory, the Claritas Corporation provides a targeting service for the direct marketing business. If advertisers have a message to send, here's where they can find people to send it to.
Hi, Eric. Welcome.
Morning.
Let's go down the hall.
Their system is called geodemographics. A man called Mark Capaldini agreed to show Larson how it worked.
So I thought what I'd start out with is the general kinds of information. What kinds of information do direct marketers use to target people like me, or me specifically?
Well, essentially, there are two types of information. There's public information and private information.
Start with the public first.
The first source would be individual records, things like real estate transactions that are typically recorded at a courthouse, who bought a property, how much they paid for it, and so forth. Another would be driver's licenses. In most of the states will sell basic data in their driver's license file to commercial firms. So it's available publicly through these firms. And then finally, there's the mother lode of demographic data, which is the U.S. Census itself. An enormous amount of data, very detailed and broken down into some very small neighborhood units.
Claritas has taken the whole United States and divided it first into zip codes and then into census tracts and block groups. The U.S. Census releases demographic details about block groups, the average property type, average family size, and so on. Claritas then overlays information from public records on individuals who live in each area. They then start to build a snapshot of the typical resident based on their ages, the cars they drive, what they paid for their homes, the mortgages they hold. But this is only the beginning.
Well, there is an explosion of private data resources available now. That's because there's a huge marketplace in exchanging lists. Essentially, anytime you write down your name and address on any kind of piece of paper, chances are reasonably good that that information is going into some private database somewhere.
What about the nitty-gritty stuff? Credit information, financials, things like that. Do companies use that stuff?
Yes. One of the new trends in target marketing is the combination of credit-based data with some of these other sources that we've talked about. For example, our company works with TRW, one of the larger credit bureau organizations in the United States. They provide us with neighborhood-level data.
The private data explosion means that there are thousands of lists for sale containing personal information. The big credit bureaus sell lists of bank or credit card users showing their available credit. Smaller bureaus hawk other lists. From around $60 a thousand, you can buy names of college professors, or turkey farmers, Weight Watchers, or gourmet chefs. To build their geodemographic system, Claridus aggregates this private information for each neighborhood unit.
We look at about 40 different variables, things like density, age, distributions, presence or absence of children, affluence, education, occupation. And by looking at this long string of different characteristics, we can match every neighborhood in the United States up to one of several cluster types. We happen to have 40 types, and we've given nicknames to each one.
In their geodemographic typecasting, areas with a melting pot of younger people are dubbed Bohemian Mix. Poor rural neighborhoods become shotguns and pickups. Affluent suburbs with mature families are known as pools and patios. Every address has been assigned to one of these classifications. To the direct marketer, each person takes on the identity of their cluster type.
I'm going to be moving to San Francisco soon. What's to become of me?
We have all this data in the computer. Let's take a look. It's right over here.
Larson's new address is put into the system, and in seconds, his fate is revealed.
As you can see, this is a map of San Francisco. The lines being drawn are the zip code outlines. As the two-digit numbers appear, they are the cluster assignments for the census tracts. There will be multiple census tracts inside each zip code. We can see down here in the lower left-hand corner where you'll be living that there are a lot of cluster 20s. Cluster 20 is young influentials.
That sounds pretty important, but what does it mean? I mean, who are we?
Cluster 20, young influentials, is the closest thing we have to the stereotypical yuppie. It's probably best described as a 30-something childbearing neighborhood. These folks may still be in townhouses or row houses. They may not have yet graduated to the detached single-family home, but they're definitely starting to have children, and they're making the transition from a couple-oriented lifestyle to a family-oriented lifestyle.
This was not what Erik wanted to hear. A computer had scavenged his personal data and produced an uncannily accurate picture of the Larson home.
How are direct marketers going to use this? Does this mean we're going to get more junk mail?
Well, you're likely to get a lot of mail for certain types of products that these neighborhoods are known to consume in high quantities. You're much more likely to be buying products related to children.
Direct marketers use this program to highlight areas containing typical consumers of their products. Sure enough, the Larson family is right in a hot zone for buying children's clothing. When he reached San Francisco, Erik Larson saw it with new eyes. No longer an amorphous sea of faceless individuals, it was now a carefully plotted matrix of clusters. Below him was the young influentials set that he had now joined. To be true to type, he would need to start jogging and feed his kids yogurt and whole wheat bread. From here, upward mobility is more a sideways shift to a money and brains neighborhood. Middle age could see him relaxing with his pools and patios neighbors, reminiscing with pride on his climb from young suburbia and bohemian mix. But geodemographics is just a starting point for direct marketers beginning to flex their new technology muscles. Theirs is a determinist view of the world. All consumer behavior is predictable if one has access to enough of the factors associated with each decision to buy.
Hi. What you need? Yeah. Okay. Your last four digit of your phone number?
0109.
0109. And your last name, sir?
Larson.
Mr. Erik Larson?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have you in here. Number 3. Oh. There you are.
In recent years, direct marketers have quietly built themselves a formidable infrastructure on which to base their new enterprise. Even the most mundane transaction now seems to involve the computerized gathering of data.
Direct marketers depend heavily upon data. In fact, the more data, the better they're able to function. Might even be able to describe data as the fuel that direct marketers run on.
To learn what to do with all the data they've collected, marketers now go to college. At Northwestern University near Chicago, there is a graduate program in direct marketing. Here, Professor Block teaches students how to divide consumers into different categories so they can target those most likely to respond.
Good morning. Today we're going to talk about market segmentation. There are 3 kinds of segmentation variables, or families of segmentation variables. The first are demographics and geographics.
Over the years, marketers have gathered 3 types of information on people: demographic, psychographic, and purchase behavior. Combinations of these variables can be used to target consumers. Computerized statistical modeling now makes this easy. One technique is cluster analysis.
We can show what cluster analysis looks like graphically. Let's take a couple of variables. And these can be almost any of the variables we've talked about. We can now represent individuals as dots in this 2-dimensional space, where this individual would have this much of this variable and this much of this variable. Let's now put in lots of people, lots of dots. And we can even put in some down here. Now, the idea of cluster analysis would be that we have 2 groups of similar dots. And we could kind of
But in practice, only certain variables will produce such clear-cut groups. The trick is to find which ones. Consumers are a complex bunch, and the best predictors are not always obvious.
We did do an analysis of spaghetti sauce purchases over a year and a half, and the only thing we found that predicted was, which tells you a little bit about the nature of the predictors, is that ragu purchasers were more likely to own dogs, and Prego purchasers were more likely to own cats. We refer to this as our furball theory of consumer behavior. But outside of the animal ownership, the prior purchase behavior completely swamps any other variable.
From intense statistical research, marketers can now reveal that the most likely person to buy a product is someone who bought it before. That's why purchase information is so highly prized.
One of the reasons why the techniques of direct marketing have been able to expand into areas that have traditionally been not thought of in direct marketing terms is the recent availability of this kind of data. For example, the supermarket. All of those purchases that are scanned, product by product, purchase by purchase, are all now finding their way into direct marketing databases.
Enterprising companies have made it their business to collect this type of data. Computer tapes from supermarkets across America are eagerly consumed by IRI in Chicago. On them are nothing more than streams and streams of product barcode readings from checkouts, listing all goods purchased in a particular store on a given day. Banks of mainframe computers turn this sea of information into something useful. Patterns emerge of product penetration and changes in market share. These show whether a particular marketing strategy has worked. But what direct marketers need to drive their campaigns is a link between the anonymous checkout data and the identity of each individual shopper. There is now an easy way to do this.
The financial institution, Citicorp, is providing a card like this one, where the customer using this card is having all of their purchases recorded, establishing a long purchase history. The financial institution then, in collecting this data, has a database to sell to marketers based on the actual supermarket purchase history.
This data is so valuable that the bank waives its usual fee to the supermarket, which in turn makes money-saving offers to regular shoppers. Ultimately, frequent shopper programs could be tied in with this handy gadget, a mobile advertising screen on a shopping cart. It displays the day's special offers within each aisle. It also tells customers where they are and where they can find things. It can do this because as the cart travels through the store, infrared transmitters pass a code to the screen telling it where it is and what message to display. The expense of providing this service to shoppers is offset by the fact that the device is also collecting information. The route a shopper takes is recorded and matched with the eventual purchases. Information has itself become a commodity, and a new reciprocal trade has evolved. Services are provided for consumer convenience on the back of data gathering programs. The Prodigy system is a good example of the trend. Erik Larson is investigating it. It's an online system linking home PCs by modem to a host mainframe. Graphic screens offer users information and home shopping services. You can even buy your groceries with your computer. The trade-off is that the system carries advertisements at the bottom of the screen. And what's more, these ads are targeted at each user. The computer keeps a log of who uses the system and what they're interested in, and then sends them selected ads. It's a kind of electronic junk mail.
It's continually updating a profile of my consuming self. If I buy something from Grocery Express, I mean, conceivably the system can then later on identify that I'm a consumer of a particular kind of pepperoncini or something, which is fine as long as it gives me what I want, but I think in the final analysis, the user, the active user, will always wind up giving the system far more than the system gives back.
Wherever we go in the modern world, it seems we're leaving a trail of data that others can easily follow. The power to gather and link all this data together could easily be the power of social control. Suddenly, this begins to take on a more sinister overtone. Whatever became of Big Brother?
Well, we've already moved beyond the Orwellian notion of one centralized data bank. We may have been worried about that 30 years ago, but today what we're worried about is the ability of thousands, maybe even millions of computers around the country that contain information on most people, from the time that they're born until they die. And it's possible with the push of a button to bring all that information together and create a profile on somebody, a biography, or as Arthur Miller called it, a womb-to-tomb dossier. With that possible, we don't want to worry about one centralized data bank. What we have is a decentralized but de facto national database on citizens. This information is often unprotected. There are no legal barriers for access. And so marketers have access to this information and they can do with it whatever they're technically capable of doing.
There is a growing concern that this unregulated database power could easily fall into the wrong hands. Getting access to it is surprisingly easy.
Well, as I began to look at direct mail and the credit bureaus and all, I began to realize that what's fueling direct mail is a lot of separate super bureaus, brokers of information that are sharing information with basically anybody. And that it seemed to me that everything was probably available, and I wanted to find out if it was or not. And so I contacted one and said I was an employee of McGraw-Hill, which I am because they own Business Week, and that I was thinking of hiring some people. I'm staffing up a new department, and I wanted to check their credit records.
The credit bureau sent someone over to confirm that McGraw-Hill actually existed. Roth Fetter was then given a password to get into the main computer. He first looked up some of his colleagues, with their agreement, of course.
I typed in about 4 colleagues, and there it was. And, you know, it was a frightening experience because all of a sudden I'm looking at the innards of people I work with every day. I mean, I'm seeing how much they earn and what their credit ratings are. And I figured that's enough with the small fish. Now I wanted to go catch a big one. So I decided to look up the credit record of Dan Quayle, the Vice President of the United States. All I needed was an address, and so I found an old address of his in an old who's who in the Midwest. I must admit, I didn't think this was going to work. I mean, I just couldn't believe that it would. But I typed in Dan Quayle, his old address, and then literally a split second later, AKA J. Danforth Quayle, and then it just laid out the information. Nothing really interesting about the Vice President, as one would expect. He's sort of a figure that you don't expect a lot interesting to come out about. He shops more at Sears than at Brooks Brothers and pays his credit cards on time. He's just a straight arrow, normal citizen. What it proved to me, it proved out my experiment that anything is available in this society. There are no secrets anymore. If you can go out and get the Vice President's credit report, if you can do that, we've got too open a society in that sense, and somebody's got to begin to police it.
The rapid growth of information technology seems to be stretching society's ability to cope. Arno Penzias, head of research at AT&T Bell Labs, is well placed to see what's happening.
Well, in my book, I liken computers to automobiles, which is to say they help us with speed and not with direction. Whenever we go through an increase in power, we have to also introduce some driver training. The power that technology gives us is a power over our environment, but it's power to get someplace fast and also power to run into a tree. You know, if you're in a car and you're lost, if you go faster, you don't get home more quickly, you just get lost over a wider area. We can't easily turn the power off. We can't turn the clock back. The Luddite's lost. So power is coming, we just have to use it wisely. So it's this question of adding driver training rather than banning automobiles, which is what we're going to have to do.
Direct marketers are worried that this driver training may be forced on them by law. The Direct Marketing Association is lobbying hard on behalf of its industry members. It held a conference recently in Washington and invited the president's special advisor on consumer affairs to tell them what they were doing wrong. Dr. Bonnie Guiton began gently.
Very important to us. Let me start, however, with a note of empathy. I recognize that it's really got to be tough when the medium you live and die by is most commonly referred to as junk mail by consumers and regulators alike. And the truth is that the potential exists right now for consumers to be stripped of virtually all of their individual privacy. Now, granted, it's only the potential. Direct marketers certainly aren't in the business of developing detailed personal profiles on millions of individual consumers, but the fear of this potential generates is very real. And as Ellen Gilmore of Ford Motor...
When direct marketers quip, "We know more about you than your mother," they can hardly be surprised at the reaction they provoke. People resent it when information technology makes it difficult for them to remain anonymous when they choose.
Call 1-800-THE-FOOL!
Call 1-800-631-3800.
One time people might want anonymity is when they're responding to an advertisement. Many of these 800-number calls are routed through to specialist telesales operations. There's one here in Ogden, Utah. It's a state-of-the-art facility that can handle 6,000 calls an hour.
And here's the customer service number, 1-800-421-0725.
So you would like to receive the product still. So the total package would be $29.90 for the Bench Buster and the VitaGuard Dider's Daily Protector vitamins.
51004.
Its computerized switching circuits route the calls through to any one of 700 waiting agents. But with this advanced technology comes a new capability. New digital telephone lines have separate data channels which identify the telephone number of the person making the call. It takes a couple of seconds for the controlling computer to look this number up in a database of telephone subscribers and put the name and address on the agent's screen.
Okay, am I speaking with Ann Brown?
Yes.
Are you still living at 1529 Ridgeview Street, Northwest?
That's correct.
Okay. Are you still living in Washington, D.C.? And is your zip code still 200?
This can have mutual benefits. Regular callers have orders taken more efficiently or credited to their account. Their address is spelled right when the goods are shipped. But the potential is also there for a person's identity to be added to yet another marketing database, maybe without their knowing. Does this constitute a misuse of technology?
I think society just has to work these things out. If I don't want my secretary to know what numbers I call, I have to use a different telephone. If I don't want my wife to know how much I've paid for her gift, I can't use our common credit card because the bill comes home. So one has to take a little bit of extra care. There's no such thing as free lunch. You know, we get the benefits of technology. We get the benefits of living in a complex society, but they don't come free. They simply don't come free. And you can hold me for my gold like a leprechaun and say, you want technology with no side effects, I can't give it to you.
For the purposes of direct marketing, we think this is a real advantage for the consumer. It gives them an...
The DMA is responding to criticism by promoting the positive side of the technology, as well as offering guidelines on its use. However, ethics is not a precise science, and there's plenty of room to maneuver.
Of course, it does raise the very interesting question of what is truly confidential or personal information. I think you'll agree that privacy is a state of mind. And one really has to ask oneself, what is the drawback? What is the injury to a consumer who receives an unsolicited piece of mail or an unsolicited telephone call? There are no victims of direct marketing. At very worst, you ignore or discard the message.
But discarding the message can be tiresome when it comes repeatedly by phone.
Hello? They always seem to call at the wrong time. For me, that's usually in the evening. I've got my daughter in the bathtub, and I race to the phone. I think it's Erik calling or something, and it's some direct marketing person. Maybe even a recording. It's not even a person on the other end of the line.
Is the junk phone call now the unacceptable face of direct marketing? Some consumers have banded together to fight back.
Absolutely. But, you know, I'm a little bit concerned about doing business over the phone with some firm that I really don't know anything about. If you wouldn't mind, what's the exact name of your firm? Uh-huh. And what city are you located in? You know, I have, in the past, told your organization not to call me, and that such calls to my home would be your firm's acceptance of my offer to allow your use of my property for your commercial purposes for a fee of $100. You'll understand it tomorrow. I'll talk to your general manager. Thank you. I sent about 650 telemarketers a list of consumers that have asked my organization, Private Citizen, to tell telemarketers not to bother them. These consumers, these subscribers, authorized me to be their legal agent to tell telemarketers, number one, we want to be left alone at home, and number two, Mr. Telemarketer, if you call us even after we've told you not to, your call to my home will be acceptance of my offer to allow you to use my phone for your commercial purposes for a fee of $100. If you want to use my property, you have to pay for it. I've taken an organization to court and won 97 cents at one time. I've also won $38 in court costs. I thought it was the greatest win that anybody could ever have. It was the first time in my mind that a simple telephone call created an obligation on the callor to pay the called person. In fact, the judge stood up at the end of the case and he said, look, to the telemarketer, he says, look, I've heard enough. I was called last night during the football game twice by you folks, or by folks just like you. I've had it. Mr. Bullmash wins, and the next time you call Mr. Bullmash, you're going to pay him even more.
Trying to head off consumer revolt, the Direct Marketing Association offers a service of its own to get people's names off telesales lists. But Bob Bullmash is still not impressed.
There is no requirement the telemarketing industry even use a telephone preference service. It's totally voluntary. And telemarketers know before they make their next call that they're more likely to disturb somebody in any case. Why should they buy a list of people who don't want to be called when they know most people don't want to be called in the first place?
Well, DMA is making a big effort to turn around the public's conception of its industry as involved in the junk mail business. And so what they're trying to do is make people aware of how information is used, how information is collected, that they have the right to get their name off of mailing lists. And I think that those are very, very important steps, and steps that have not been taken by other industries. The missing piece is, of course, that they are gathering the information and using it. Where they step in is to say, let's inform consumers about how we're using the information. Our concern at the ACLU is to say, let's stop that information from even reaching the marketers. I mean, once they have it, they have it. But our concern is to create boundaries and walls around that information in the first place so that they can't even get access to it without the individual giving it to them directly.
At both state and federal levels, bills to restrict the commercial transfer of personal information have been shot down by intense lobbying by the marketers. But a model for how legislation might operate can be seen abroad. Europeans are setting a common standard for data protection. It is proposed that people should have rights over their computerized data. They should have control over its inclusion in a marketing list and over the transfer of the list to others. They should be able to get their names off lists or to ensure that the data is accurate. In Europe, direct marketers are looking for ways to fall in line with these principles and still stay in business.
The solution is to collect information in a way that is transparent to the data subject, the person who's giving you the data.
NDL uses questionnaires that give consumers a choice. If they don't want their data used for further marketing, they can check a box. Marketers hope this option won't be used.
The advantage to people is they're going to get mail that interests them. But rather like I perceive happening in the United States, if the growth of direct mail continues without continuous improvements in targeting, then people are just going to filter away the mail that they get's irrelevant. They're not going to read it. More and more, they're going to be concerned about the volume of mail coming to them that is not targeted.
Time is running out for direct marketers to solve this dilemma. People respond badly to invasions of their privacy, but they are equally ill-disposed to a mountain of irrelevant junk mail. Stan Rapp thinks he has the answer.
The problem is the opportunity. The opportunity now to have voluntary advertising. A very different kind of advertising where the consumer asks for the information, volunteers to say what I want, what I need. I'll show you an example. Here's an advertisement for Cheer Free. They have a card here that asks you to provide your name, your address, and answer these questions. What they send out in response to this, it is not just a sample in a box, as has usually been done in the past. It's a message. It's a wonderful message that goes on and on about this. But you asked for it. You want to know about how this product is going to answer my need. And you'll notice when I get it in the mail, it says itch, itch, and, you know, I know what this is about because I'm the person who's itchy. And, of course, here it is, the sample product. This is an example of what we mean by individualized marketing. Marketing to the individual. Direct relationship marketing is what we're talking about.
But will it work? Will sufficient numbers of consumers volunteer to receive direct marketing? At the Ogilvy and Mather Agency in New York, they're testing this approach on a campaign to sell a $1,600 water purification plant.
Hi, guys. How you doing? Sorry I'm late. I was just on the phone.
The crucial part is generating the initial response that can then be built on by direct marketing. They started with a couple of inserts placed in local newspapers. The one that did best was the one that made the best offer.
Explain that very easily. First of all, we've used one of the most powerful words in advertising right up here, free. You know, so we've said free demonstration videotape right in headline. We've got a really strong benefit-oriented headline. Banish sediment. This machine will do exactly what we say it's going to do.
Waiting for people to show an initial interest before showering them with mail could be the way for direct marketing to put aside its junk image and affect a new gentility. But restraint is not everyone's cup of tea. Based in rural England, one man believes there is another way. Stun the reader with the creative impact of each mailing. Exciting, interesting mail will never be thrown out as junk. To see if his ideas would work in practice, Nova asked the man regarded by many as the guru of creative inspiration how he would handle the American water filter account. He responded to the challenge in his usual eccentric style.
Wow, what a team! Right, thanks for getting together like this. We've got a real challenge on today, right? 2 days to crack the problem of how to sell water plant across Europe and right here in the UK by direct marketing. Chrissy and Jane and I have been...
Direct marketing in Europe is growing fast, but still has a slightly down-market image. The local distributor of the water filtration system was convinced that it would never work for an expensive product like this.
He couldn't sell it with direct marketing, and perhaps all he's seen is good old-fashioned junk mail. I think what he needs is a little real creativity and a lot of thought, perhaps, in list selection and database and the kind of overlays we can do. Anybody got any ideas of how we can start making some of these lists work?
There are occasional ecological disasters.
Warming immediately to the task, Robertson's youthful team looked for ways to make an impression on consumers.
In other words, when a disaster happens, we hit the press with an ad about purity of water. What about, come on, more about families. Think about families. What about mums? Do mums... Babies! Babies! Are you pregnant again? Yes! Babies, right.
Emotive. I mean, we could use this emotive mother and child thing on TV, a great piece to camera by a mother, concerned mother.
We have a report here from the Friends of the Earth which says that 80% of sewage treatment works should now be in breach of the law. So it's important that we remember that it's about sewage treatment which controls the purity of the water. And purity of the water leads us on to the geography, because it will vary area by area across the country.
In any branch of advertising, it's not what you say, but how you say it that gets the best results. Their next proposal was to use a novel combination of media to heighten awareness of water pollution.
We could mail people a magic looking glass. They could be told to watch Channel 4 at 8 o'clock in the morning to watch the TV commercial and discover the collected impurities in their water. And in fact, when you hold this over, in fact, words would appear. So you could have arsenic, asbestos, all the nasties in words suddenly appearing and phone in. And that way we would generate loads and loads of leads, which would help, and by judicious questioning, we'd help find out precisely the kind of people who are interested in this. So there's a TV campaign to work up, several TV campaigns to make up. What about attention grabbers? Dead fish. Dead fish, brilliant. Jumping out the bath, maybe.
Yeah, out of the bath.
Cut a piece of litmus paper out of, in the shape of a dead fish.
Oh, the dead fish's tongue?
Yep, a dead fish's tongue hanging out.
Elaborate mailings like this may be exciting, but they are also expensive to produce. To be cost-effective, they could only be sent to highly selected households. Graham Robertson and account executive Chrissy Saunders went to pick the brains of their resident database expert, John Ozimek, to help them target the campaign. At this stage, they would have to guess what sort of people would be the most likely prospects and look for mailing lists that match.
Right. What you've got here in terms of lifestyle.
Right. Start with some lifestyle lists. There's from NDL, from Behaviour Bank, and from ICD. And those will give you the first two problems solved, family and type of house.
Right.
So you'll need to give me some idea as to whether you want affluent or house size.
Definitely affluent.
What about purchases of things like expensive exercise bikes, coffee machines, those sort of things? Can we pick up on that?
Yes, up to a point. There is some, there might be some problem about getting the exact product, but yes. And then what one can overlay onto that, the sorts of contaminants in water by region, broken down by region across the country. And there's a very recent report out on that.
We could do that by postcode?
You can eventually overlay that back by postcode, yes. Right. So that you could target people by the sort of water they've got, by the sort of house they've got, and the sort of family, yes.
Water pollution is certainly topical. The object of the campaign would be to turn people's awareness of the problem into a desire for the product. There are a number of ways to do this.
We're going to cut this down. We want 4 ads left in the wall in just a few minutes. Come on, let's go.
This morning we identified the positive motivators, negative motivators, okay? Thinking positive, we've got pure water for less than £1.30 a week. Quite an offer there. We've also got on the positive side these two, not so sure about, but I think there's an idea in both of them.
Let's get rid of them.
Okay, right. You're the boss. Quick. Okay, on the negative side, fear. You make her brush her teeth. You tell her not to talk to strangers. So why do you put arsenic in her orange juice? Body copy supporting that proposition, and quite a powerful call to action.
Yes, that'll stay. Throw that one. Right. Don't like that.
Okay.
Don't like that. Right. Don't like that. Right. That's okay. What do you think? Jane, come on.
Let's get this one, the Volvo.
Bought a Volvo. You've joined health insurance. Wowee, you still don't drink pure water.
Hi. What have you got then?
Meanwhile, the attention-grabbing involvement devices were also worked up. The strength of the litmus paper fish idea would depend on its catching the eye and intriguing the reader.
As we said earlier...
This is a door drops.
dropped. It's been dropped. We've got a square envelope, and all you can see is a fish.
No words here at all, and it moves around in the thing.
You're teased already, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm
It'll
teased.
rattle around in there.
Okay.
It will rattle. Oh, right. Okay, so that's moving, yeah. So now I want to get inside.
And then inside, there's a card with a shrink-wrapped goldfish tipped on. First reaction, you pull that off. And then on the back of the goldfish, it says what to do.
Instructions, which is dip it into the water.
This is the colour of the litmus paper already.
Right.
It's gold.
Yes.
Okay?
And you've checked out the litmus paper, whether it will work.
Yeah, if you've got hard water, you put it in, it'll actually go blue.
Right.
And then if you've got soft, polluted water, where it's likely to be acidy because of sewage, it'll actually go yellow.
Right.
So I find this.
Right, what we got?
See what works. So
Another team tested out the magic looking glass tied in with the cryptic TV ad. The hidden message idea had been used in a straight mailing before, but not using a TV screen.
Green. Same again. Okay, let's try the red one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
Yeah.
We can put all sorts of words down there, show all the nasties that are in the water.
You guys have been brilliant. We've got such great stuff here. All we've got to do now is get together the presentation. We'll do it on video, and we've got one more thing to come maybe from Claire. But Jane, will you work the camera? Yeah, sure. And we'll just take it as we go, because we can edit afterwards and make things happen.
In his usual frenetic style, Robertson elected to record their creative ideas and send the video to the manufacturer in the United States, and actually pitch for the job.
Are you on? Are you switched on?
Yeah, it's on.
Good morning, Mr. Pryor. We're going to stun you with an astonishing world-first TV and mail campaign. Through the mail, this amazing looking glass. And when recipients watch their television ad through this glass, they will see, amidst a bubbling tank of pure water, names of pollutants appearing, visible only through the looking glass, but not to the naked eye, followed by the phone number, which will bring them ringing in to find out how water plant can bring their water back to real purity. That's the TV. It's startling. It's never been done before. Interactive involvement TV. And then we move on to press with this dramatic shot of a young girl and the startling headline, "You make her brush her teeth. You tell her not to talk to strangers. Why do you put pesticides in her squash?" Startling. And what else do we have? The goldfish mailing. Look at this. Imagine this coming through the post. If the fish turns green, your water's clean. And inside, a goldfish. A goldfish to plunge into water and bloom. And if it turns green, your water's clean. If it goes yellow, you're in real trouble. And if it goes blue, you're in a hard water area. In any case, you need water plant. Boom! Hey, hey. This really isn't junk mail. It's exciting stuff. It's fishes you plunge into water. It's full of involvement devices. It's magic-looking glasses. It's things people will want to play with, want to look at, want to touch and hold. So it's interesting and exciting. And in playing with these bits, the problem comes across that your water is contaminated to a certain level, even though that level is, in effect, government approved.
The water plant manufacturer thought the approach was certainly creative, but too negative. He did like the litmus paper fish idea, though, and asked to discuss it further. Back in New York, Ogilvy and Mather, which has the American account, has also come up with a new idea. Get existing customers to do the selling for them.
We've got a bottle. Each person would get a dozen of these bottles, and their name would be on the label. They could fill these bottles up with their sparkling water from their Connecticut water plant and bring them to their friends' houses for dinner as gifts.
Along with the bottles, we'll enclose a letter, and the letter's from the president of Connecticut, and it will say something like, "When my wife and I go visiting, we sometimes like to bring along a gift bottle of pure, crystal clear water plant water, just so friends and relatives can see how great the taste of the water is."
Terrific idea. I mean, it's a great way to leverage the people who've already bought water plant. It's unique, it's intrusive, it's three-dimensional.
Yeah, it's
That's great.
The campaign is intended to exploit the way people socialize within their own consumer category. Young influentials tend to band together. But how influential will they be? Growing familiarity with the wily ways of advertising builds a certain barrier of contempt.
Give me that little peanut.
She just ate.
Oh, littlest consumer.
But direct marketers have technology on their side. This child may not have bought anything herself yet, but she is already in a marketing database. She'll get another pack of free diapers on her first birthday. Her generation may grow up to wonder what all the fuss was about. She may be happy to play the marketers along, switching frequent shopper programs till she gets what she wants. And direct marketing will have to evolve to serve this more discerning consumer. The current clutter of junk mail is alienating people and making the medium less effective. Unsolicited telephone calls provoke anger and hostility. Above all, direct marketing will evolve with the communications technology that drives it. Fiber optic cable offers new ways to interact with consumers in their homes. The junk mail of today could become the digitally integrated multimedia direct marketing of the future.
This is a special message for the Larson family. Your daughter, Lauren, will be 5 years old on April 2nd, 1995. In this time, she may have drunk 350 gallons of water. Wouldn't you like the water Lauren drinks to be as crystal clear and pure as can be for only 5 cents a gallon?
Is this progress? Maybe. At least, as they say today, you can always discard the message.
Here's the customer service number 1-800.
That's great.
The computer is the solution.
There is an explosion of private sources.
But freedom of information is embarrassing.
Just how much did the White House and Cabinet know about the Iran-Contra affair? Bill Moyers explores this question in High Crimes and Misdemeanors, coming up next at 9 on Frontline. Stay with us here on WETA, Stereo 26.
Does this mean we're going to get more junk mail? Data is the fuel that direct marketers want. There are no systems anymore.
Oh, we have you in here. Number 3. Oh, there you are.